No, not many of you. Anyway, it's a book that he wrote, and it was written as if C.S. Lewis is a big Christian scholar. He did the whole Chronicles of Narnia and all that stuff too. But in this particular book, he wrote it as if the devil was writing to one of his demons, and every demon's in charge of a Christian, and so they're corresponding back and forth from the field back to the main base. Here's what's going on, and he reports back. And so it's these letters back and forth. And in the book, there's this one demon called Wormwood, and he's got this brand new Christian, and so he writes back and forth. And so in that particular, this is what one of the things C.S. Lewis wrote in this letter. And so again, he writes it this way: "My dear Wormwood, the real trouble with your patient," which is what a Christian is that he is merely Christian. And now understand that that's a good thing, but from the demon's point of view, here's your problem: he's just a Christian. I mean, at the purest sense, he's a Christian. And so what does he say? He says, what we want is, if they become Christian at all, is to keep them in a state called Christianity and the new psychology, Christianity and the faith healing, Christianity and the psychic research, Christianity and astrology, and on and on and on. That's the toxic religion that tries to create something external beyond our faith. You go to a Christian bookstore, and there are so many books, and don't get me wrong, I get a lot of books. They're good books. But we're always running around saying, I need this one more thing. If I just have this, if I just do that, if there's just, maybe this is the silver bullet that's going to help us. As leaders, we joke about it. We're thinking, what is it? What's the one thing that we can get people to grow? What is it, we want that one thing. And we run the risk of becoming externally focused when we do something like that. When we add this external baggage of Christ plus thinking, it produces slavery and bondage. It results in a joyless and a cynical and a hypocritical and a judgmental life. And that's part of the results of that kind of a toxic religious focus. So anyway, it's external versus the internal. The third one is a toxic religion promotes spiritual pride rather than humility. The tendency is, of course, if you're living, and particularly if you come out of this external thing where you're looking at your measuring self and thinking, I'm doing pretty good, as you begin to feel better than everyone else from your point of view, and then you begin to think, I'm right and you're wrong. I know I'm right, and I know you're wrong. So you need to think the way I think. But Jesus had a zero tolerance for that kind of thinking, and he warns us against the spiritual pride. In Luke 18:9-12, we read the story here. It says, to some who were confident of their own righteousness and looked down on everyone else, that's the spiritual pride, Jesus told this parable. 2 men went up to the temple to pray. One was a Pharisee, the other a tax collector. The Pharisee stood by himself and prayed, God, I thank you that I am not like other people, robbers, evildoers, adulterers, or even like this tax collector. I fast twice a week and give 1/10 of all I get. External thinking, first of all. But what's Jesus describing there? He's describing the spiritual pride that tries to elevate ourselves and compare ourselves and think that we're better. It's easy to do when you see someone else caught up in sin because you're thinking, oh man, they're messed up. Look at me, I'm not. And so therefore, God must think I'm better because they're not. I'm not thinking. We tend to give credit to ourselves as a result and thinking, whew, boy, God, I'm glad I got it. I'm glad I made right choices, and they, too bad they made wrong choices. And like the Pharisee saying, I'm thankful that I did what I did and all this stuff I did. And before you know it, what we're doing is we're kind of crediting ourselves for our accomplishments instead of giving the credit where it's really due, which is to God himself and his working in our life. One of the problems of the spiritual pride is that, typically those who are spiritually proud can't even see it. I mean, you could put the truth right in front of them, and they're still not going to get it. We were just talking about that. Those of you who go to the Bible study today, it's about, you end up, the truth, Jesus could stand right there. Jesus himself said, look, I could do miracles in front of you. You're still not going to get it because you were so proud that you refuse to listen to and be open to anything else. That you refuse to want to change and to be willing to submit yourself to what, the truth really might be. That's one of the reasons people despise Christians so much, is because this pride that we tend to show and thinking about, we go into neighborhoods or into people and we come with such a almost a self-judgment. We don't think it is. We call it charity. But in reality, we're like, we're better and you're not, and we're going to help you. And yeah, you're welcome. You don't need to say thank you, but you're welcome. As if we are any better than them. And they look, why? I mean, as churches, we can't even get along. We try to steal from each other. We're trying to say, why don't you come to our church? I know you got your church, but they can't be as good as our church. So why don't you come to our church? I was visiting my son in Iowa one time, and they have, it's a strong area of Reformed churches, and this is in any denomination, so it's not strictly that, but on one street corner there was a Dutch Reformed, a Christian Reformed, and a United Reformed. 3 of the 4 corners were locked in by Reformed Church. And yet they're in bitter battle. And so I'm talking to one of the guys, the father-in-law of my son. I says, man, you guys have got to be so close in the same theology. Why are you guys fighting all the time? And he made an interesting point. He says, the more you're the same, the more you try to find ways to find that you're different. And so they'll argue about the stupidest little things. And people from the outside look in and are thinking, God, you guys can't even get along. You're arguing about the style of worship. You're arguing about what you wear and the way you look. You're arguing about, it's like, it says, do I really want that? No, I don't want that. And what's happening really is this attitude of pride that we're trying to be able to, what do they call it, the old rooster thing, where we're trying to really come out strong. And Jesus comes down hard on that. Humility, on the other hand, keeps our mind open to the truth and humble in the way that we see it and wanting to seek what's right and recognizing our own imperfections. Luke 18, going on, 13 to 14, says, but the tax collector, standing far off, would not even lift up his eyes to heaven, but beat his breast, saying, God, be merciful to me, a sinner. I tell you, this man went down to his house justified rather than the other. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but for the one who humbles himself will be exalted. That's spiritual humility. Look, we're not a perfect church, and we're close. No, that's pride. We're not a perfect church. I don't know if you realize that. I'm not a perfect pastor. I don't want to use the word. Because I'm not even close to that. I got my issues. One of the things we need to do is recognize the own toxic religion that's in us, the toxic things in our own life. We got to recognize the times when we're measuring things externally and not inwardly. We got to recognize times where I'm trying to look at things more from a humanistic point of view than what God wants. We got to look at the times where I'm being kind of a little prideful here, and I'm unwilling to listen to what you have to say because I don't want to be wrong, and I don't want you to tell me I'm wrong. And I'll go off and think I'm wrong, but I'm not going to tell you that I'm wrong. And we have that kind of attitude. And we got to own that and say, look, we're not perfect. You can come into here and you'll find things wrong with our church. You can probably do it in one Sunday. You don't need to go to a life group to figure it out. It's there. Toxic religion is always going to creep in. Back to the article in C.S. Lewis, is that because that's the agenda of the enemy. He's going to try to make us he's on the one side, he's going to push to the Christianity and the Christ plus, and then when we get to that place, then he's going to come along the backside and look at you, you're so screwed up. And then he goes to the person who says, I want nothing to do with that because look at who this person is. And he keeps us separate. We have to be able to understand and look at ourselves and say, look, it's who we are. We have to be open to it. And be able to humble ourselves and not be so prideful in the way that we react to things. And look at it and say, not to throw the baby out with the bathwater kind of thing. And be able to say, but I know God is at work here. And what is He teaching me? How do I need to change? What can I do to be able to make things better? And be honest in those areas. And so let me give you some prescriptions for toxic-free religion. And when I say toxic-free, it's the pursuit of toxic-free, because again, it's always going to come around, and you always have to be on guard. First of all, one of them is focus on Christ alone, not Christ plus. The Bible's clear, and if you haven't read it already, Christ is enough. Ephesians 2:8-9 says, for by grace have you saved through faith. It is not of your own doing. It's a gift of God, not of a result of works, so that no one can boast. God did not want to make it anywhere it's Christ and, that you can even take credit for any piece of it. It's all Him, and it's all a gift. And so you've got to focus on your faith and your life about Christ alone. That is enough. Anything I do beyond that is unrelated to my relationship with God. That I am content with that. True religion puts God at the center, and we adjust our life to fit His truth. Romans 12:2 says, "Do not conform to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, and by testing your own, discern what is God's will, what is good and acceptable and perfect." And that means if there's something you don't agree with, don't bail. I see it a lot. I say something wrong, someone does something wrong, and next thing you know, I'm not going anymore to your church. I'm going somewhere else. Is that really the gospel message? That we can't get along, we can't reconcile, we can't find a way to come together and make things right? Instead, we just kick them to the curb and bail? No. It's Christ alone. He's at the center. He's the one I seek. He's the one I pursue. He's the relationship. He's what matters. And so in any situation, it says, what would Christ want? What is Christ's will? How do I align myself to Him? How do you align it? And guess what? If we both align ourselves to Christ's will, we will reconcile. It will work out. True religion rests in our identity with Christ. Our actions are a response to who we are, not to help make who we are. We don't earn anything. It's about what's been done. We're celebrating this year about what's been done, not what is yet to be done or what we're doing. Christ is enough. And we need to guard against any of that thinking that puts it beyond that. The second thing, I'm going to keep moving. Focus on the organism, not the organization. At the very essence of religion is relationships, which is the irony, if you will, of the article. Is that because pure religion has a relationship with God through Christ at the center. And from that relationship with Christ builds a relationship with people with the church and the community in the church. And through the relationship of the church, God's mission is accomplished. It's just a whole process that takes place. And in all those relationships with others in the world that we reach out to and what we do, it's relationships. It's all about relationships. I know guys, you have a hard time with that, but it's about relationships. It's this organism. When a church feels like an organization, people become disillusioned. Books come out talking about giving up on the church. What they're talking about is they see a church and the situation of the church where it's become toxic, maybe it's external and rule-oriented. Maybe it is more, like I said, humanistic in the way it does it. I mean, it's prideful, all this kind of stuff. They look at it, it looks kind of ugly, and they see the structure that's created, and it bothers them. And so, again, through books or speakers, I mean, it's nothing new. I've heard it before. People give up on the whole church thing, as we read in the article, and then I kind of toss it out. But I think they made a mistake, because God created the church. Church isn't our idea. Church was God's idea. I mean, the early church came together. They met the first day of the week. They were called to meet the first day. They tithed to the local church so the church could do its work. It wasn't someone's idea. Someone didn't create it and think, how could we spend some money out of this deal? And said, you know what, let's get a budget together and then we can charge people. It was God's idea. Sure, we screwed it up in a lot of ways, but it still is God's idea, because the church is a living body. It's a small community of believers that come together to make a difference, believing strongly that we can do more together than we can do apart. Yeah, I can be a Christian off by myself and say, I'll just go visit different life groups, or I'll do this or that. And I can do that. And maybe I can go talk to my person at the supermarket and I can help them know Jesus. I can do that. The reality of most don't, but I can do that. But when we come together as a body, I mean, if you look back in history, so many things that the church has done great in getting started, and servicing and meeting the needs of people, that happen in the context of the local church. This idea of organism is defined as a form of life composed of mutually interdependent parts that maintain various vital processes. That sounds like 1 Corinthians 12, doesn't it?